Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Bunker. As you all know, I love to get people on the channel for interviews, for conversations, especially those who share my background in the Jehovah's Witness religion. And in today's interview, I'm really excited to welcome onto the channel author and award-winning screenwriter of Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk, Tony DuShane. Welcome.
Thanks, Lloyd. What a perfect intro.
Oh, is it perfect? Is it perfect enough, though? Because is it DuShane or DuShane?
DuShane.
DuShane. So it was perfect. I just messed it up with asking for you to correct me, but you can't have everything.
I think we all have our what do you call it? Internal where we feel like self-doubt, you know. So like we do something right. Yeah.
Always doubting myself.
Yeah, and then but we're usually doing it right most of the time, and even when we doubt, you know.
Doubting whether we're in the right religion, doubting whether we're right to leave the religion. Did I make the right decision? So
I got to tell you, sometimes I still have those thoughts.
Really? Wow.
No, seriously, never. But
yeah.
But at the same time, you're just kind of going, did I do everything? Have I been doing it right? I don't know.
Before we launch into your story, you should know that I've watched Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk fairly recently, because obviously I knew that we were going to be having this conversation, and I was anxious to do my research. And wow, what a film. And I need to know kind of right off the bat to what extent it follows your life, because presumably... well, first of all, the protagonist's name is Gabe, and that's clearly not your name. So presumably there are some deviations from your story. Would that be right?
So what the story in the novel and the film do is it's compressed into a year of high school. But like my story was about 10 years,
right.
Into my 20s and trying to do this discovery. So if I did my 10-year journey, it would be totally boring. It was better to compress it. And then the other thing was I actually had a lot more tragedies. So if I lined it up too much on my own, it would just be absurd to the viewer and the reader. So I was like, let's just focus on shunning and sex repression and suicide. So
I was actually really glad that the film dealt with particularly the sexual repression and the suicide, because I don't think suicide is explored enough as a problem among current and former Jehovah's Witnesses. This is mind control that really does things to you. And I also really appreciate the sexual repression element, because that's obviously a huge thing. And for understandable reasons, people don't typically like to bare their souls about their sex life. It's something where I think there's a hurdle to overcome. And I've tried my best in my own book to overcome that hurdle by being open and honest about my own experiences. So it was a breath of fresh air to see that explored in the film. I haven't read the book yet, but the film has kind of whetted my appetite.
If there's a film, you don't need to read the book. That's what I say. There's a movie? Why would I read? No, I'm kidding.
But no, it was great that you explored those.
Thanks.
Were you happy with the way the film? Because obviously you were screenwriter for the film, so you had quite a lot of involvement. Do you feel as though you managed to hit the main parts of your personal narrative?
It was. I was working with Eric Stoltz was just fantastic, because he just championed storytelling. He had no idea what the Jehovah's Witnesses were. And most of the people in the film had no idea really what a Jehovah's Witness was, other than, wait, you're the don't celebrate birthday people? Just like, oh no, there's more to it. But they got it, and they really got on. And Eric had me on set every day. Which is rare. He's like, don't leave my side, pretty much. And because there were corrections and things that happened on set that I needed to be around, and it was, and we had some differences in the very small nuances of the storytelling, where I wasn't sure about some of his choices, he wasn't sure about some of my choices, and then they sent me the rough cut, and I was just in tears. I was like, they got it. My vision was just blown up by 10. They did it worked, because I was looking at the pacing. I was like, I was looking at it as a song. Let's just let this build and build and build. And Eric was too, and the editors worked. So many people worked on it that had no Jehovah's Witness affiliation at all. And I think people actually, when we had a premiere at a film festival, Sasha, who played Gabe, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses were coming up to him and talking to him about Jehovah's Witness stuff. And he's looking at me like, I don't know why I was just like, just nod your head and say you understand, because they think you're actually a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah. That's kind of basic psychology, isn't it? Even though I know that Sasha has never been a Jehovah's Witness, when you sit through like 90 minutes or so of Sasha being a Jehovah's Witness, I can kind of understand people being confused. But
it was a great compliment too to Sasha, because I was like, dude, that just means you played everything right. Just relax and nod and smile.
Yeah. If people are mistaking you for a former Jehovah's Witness, it means you've done your job. And there was one other question I really needed to ask, because I want to kind of go into your actual story as soon as possible.
Sure.
It's just this niggling thing. There's a scene where Gabe gets reinstated. I'm trying not to spoil anything. Gabe gets reinstated and comes out of the Judicial Committee and is hugged by his father, who is carrying a copy of Crisis of Conscience. And I didn't understand what was happening there. What did I miss?
That was a choice by Eric, which I actually, because we had the Crisis of Conscience on set that day. And then Eric said, I think it was a couple days before, he's like, let's put the book in Paul's hand, who played the dad.
Yeah.
And just as a little thing of like, maybe dad has doubts.
Okay.
And I was kind of 50-50 on it, because I didn't think dad had doubts, but in my mind. But it's kind of funny that he would be. There was a beauty to it too. He's like, he needs to talk to the elders too, because he has this book, and we don't know in the film, we don't know the end story of that. And
actually, that kind of makes sense when you say it, because Gabe's father is so emphatic in his constant kind of statements of faith to Gabe that it's almost like he's overcompensating. Perhaps.
Yeah, so could be.
That does sort of make sense. Okay, thank you for explaining that.
So Raymond Franz got, and I'm sure he's happy about this, from heaven or the grave or whatever. He was like, wait, I got on Tony DuShane's film. How does that happen? So.
Indeed. I mean, most authors don't get to have their book frequently kind of name dropped and even shown in a Hollywood film. So, I can only imagine he would have been happy about it, but it was certainly very kind of it was very pleasing to see that particular title. I think at one point it gets called Crisis of Faith, even though the actual book Crisis of Conscience is shown on camera.
Oh, that's funny.
It's nice to see the book there, so that people can understand that there is kind of this work in existence that completely dismantles the Jehovah's Witness religion, if Jehovah's Witnesses will only summon the strength to look at it. And that kind of narrative did come across loud and clear. It was referred to as the book that shouldn't be read, and I thought that was really cleverly done.
Thank you.
So let's delve into your real story. We're departing from Gabe and we're going to Tony. And so how does Tony end up becoming a teenage Jesus jerk?
I love that. I lived in San Francisco when the book was written and came out. So when I would walk down the street, people would yell, "Hey, Jesus jerk." They used to yell, "Hey, Tony." But then they knew me as Jesus jerk, which was hilarious. Back to the original question of the deviation of the book. I think there's a lot of truth, like even spot on dialogue that I've had with the elders, that I had with my dad. It was almost verbatim in there. And I remember at the premiere, when my parents finally saw it and they were there, when some of the conversations that the dad and the son have were the exact conversations. I mean, I just kept elbowing my dad the whole time. But my journey, it's weird because the suicide part is a huge part of how I left the Jehovah's Witnesses, because my friend Gibby had killed himself, but he was disfellowshipped. So, and the Peter was not based on Gibby, but I was mourning that. I was having a rough time, and I was going, and I also been in and out of judicial committees. I don't know why the elders had this target on me. They assumed I was having sex with everyone in the congregation, and that I'm like, it just turns out I was young and good looking. I was in the back room constantly defending myself for nothing. That's
actually one thing that I couldn't really relate to with Gabe's character, is how girls were seemingly flinging themselves at him at every opportunity. Like, he just walked around a corner and there's a girl there, like, and that does not, relate. I can't relate to that in my own upbringing. But really? Yeah, it sounds like you were getting into quite a bit of trouble. You were clearly in demand, as it were.
Not so much. In demand as much as a Jehovah's Witness can be, which is heavy and then dry humping, right? And then praying about it, and then moving on. But yeah, so I didn't know what to do with the feelings of grief of my friend's suicide. My uncle had killed himself like 4 years earlier. I was feeling suicidal. I tried to talk to the elders about it, and they're just like, they said you can't grieve him because he's disfellowshipped. He's essentially dead to us. And that was their only answer. And they were getting on me to come to the meetings more and get back out in service more. And I'm like, no, I'm at a crisis. And so at the time, this was before we all had internets. That's what they were. And so I went to the library and I went to the psychology section. Essentially, I was looking for a book of how do you not kill yourself. and I found a Tony Robbins book, who's the biggest dork in the world, right? But I read one of his books and I'm like, oh, wait. And it was like this little opening. And then from there, I went to the poetry section. That's kind of all the truth in the Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk. He finds it many years before I found it, but I found the poetry section. Then I started reading novels. And that was the first time I was like, oh, these people are speaking to me. There's another conversation happening that I have never had in my life. And I've never been able to actually talk this personally to worldly people. And they're talking like with me in a book level. And that changed everything, but it didn't change everything where I stopped believing. It changed everything where I went, oh, I'm in the truth, but there's something wrong with the truth. And I don't know what it is yet. And it took another about 5 years. I would never have read Crisis of Conscience yet. It took me another 4 or 5 years until I finally found that book and read it. And I wept, especially on the Malawi parts and the Mexico, the brothers in Mexico, go ahead and bribe this, but let's go slaughter everyone in Malawi. And it's just like, which is
referenced quite a bit in the film. Yeah.
Yeah, my heart was just gutted. I was like, that's when I had oh crap, this isn't just, there might be some problems. This is bad. This is really, really bad. And I was married at the time to I got a Jehovah's Witness marriage. So I was a virgin until I was 25. Lots of dry humping. And then all of a sudden, marriage, close off, and actual nudity. And that was at 25. And but she was a Jehovah's Witness, had a huge Jehovah's Witness family. So when I told her, I was like, I can't go to the Kingdom Hall anymore. She freaked out. And then, but that's a whole another story unto itself. But when I read that book, it was really gutting. And I think I read it in the middle of writing Jesus Jerk. I was in the middle of that.
Oh, that's interesting. So you were already exploring kind of what had happened to you from the perspective of someone who didn't know the full facts or didn't know the full sort of truth about the truth when you were, and so you were midway through writing your memoir when the full scale, almost of the deception, is revealed to you by Raymond Franz,
Yeah. And I think there was a beauty in that timing because I was really trying to tackle the book and the film as just immerse yourself in this and let's not judge. Let's just show, the awfulness. And And this was so hard, both in the film and the book. I had to have respect for the Jehovah's Witnesses in order to write them in like 3 dimensions. And I had to have respect for all the characters and their points of view. And it was hard. That was not an easy place to be. So I think if I read Crisis of Conscience too soon, I wouldn't have had the empathy for the other characters that were moving around Gabe. And I think I needed that empathy at the time. And then, after we hit final draft, then I was like, oh, fuck those guys, but it's just like, but I had to keep some like deniability as I was going through the, trying to make what would hopefully be my Pulitzer Prize winning novel and my Oscar winning film. And then it turned out it just became a novel and a film, but I had higher aspirations. So.
Well, it pays to dream, doesn't it?
It's the only way I get through this stuff.
So your uncle who committed suicide, is there any did you write the Gabe's uncle with any of him in mind?
I didn't. I wrote, actually Gabe's uncle was a version of me when I was writing the book.
Oh, right.
So and a lot of what I wanted to do was just give myself, it was to give myself a break for growing up a Jehovah's Witness. It's like
you were giving yourself advice, essentially, right?
Yeah, but also kind of, I had a lot of guilt growing up a Jehovah's Witness, and then even when I left, I still had a lot of guilt that I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and I didn't tell people. And finally, I kind of was just like, "This isn't my fault. Why am I holding this in?" And then so that was kind of the beauty of it. And yeah, and then the uncle started out as me in early drafts, and then I'm like, he needs to be more stupid. He needs to be more dumb. It'd be a lot more funny if he's really dumb.
Because he is actually telling Gabe to basically become a Jehovah's Witness and take it seriously. So presumably that would not be your advice to your younger self.
Oh dear, no, dear God, no. But in the early drafts, it was a lot more straight. And then after that, it's like, all right, let's make this guy a buffoon a little bit. Let's throw, because what I tried to do, especially in the book and the film, is everyone who helps Gabe is crazier than the Jehovah's Witnesses. If you really look at their characters, they're nuts, except for Lori, our cheerleader. She's the only one she's our moral balance of the whole film, but everyone else is crazy. And so it's just like, I kind of wanted Gabe to have this terrible advice from everybody. And then he's like, all right, I got to make a choice. But everyone's screwed up except for the cheerleader, who is ironically the only person who tells any truth in the whole film. So.
Yeah, she's the one that you probably relate to most, I think, out of all of the characters. Okay, and you obviously mentioned the fact that you lost your friend Gibby. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is your story, and you should share as much or as little as you want. But are you able to, shed any light on what was going through his mind, perhaps, or what led to that tragedy? He
did get disfellowshipped. I knew he was in it. And when he got disfellowshipped, I stopped talking to him. But there were also other complications. He started doing drugs. He stole from me. And like the last time I talked to him, he would lied about stealing from me. And it was just blatant. And I was like, crap. So there was a lot of mixed emotions there. And then he shot himself. And I feel like it's a direct result of the Jehovah's Witnesses, as well as other, he was getting into drugs and other stuff, but it's weird, the air of violence that was kind of around that time in the Jehovah's Witnesses. And it was just, I don't know if it's still the same today, but there was just kind of this violent undertone of, everything's, Armageddon's coming. We're gonna the Holocaust was just a trial run to what's going to happen to you guys, and there was just, I don't know what it was, but there was a little violence in the air, like not only with Gibby, but there was like 2 other people who were murderers from my old congregation. One guy murdered his whole family, and it's just like there was something there that was just off. Man, I think I got really off track, but Gibby killed himself. And then I had another little brother there was a guy who was like a little brother to me, Matt. He killed himself the way Peter does in the film, but that's not he wasn't Peter's journey, but I did want Peter to hang himself in the trees, kind of where the boys played, because that's how Matt killed himself. So there's a narrative of suicide. You know, it's like, oh my God, you had one suicide. Oh no, there's been about 4 or 5.
So there were numerous suicides that you were aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, and Matt's suicide was the worst. I lived with him. I knew him since he was a baby, and, you know, killed himself in his late 20s. And it's just like, that was the last really hard suicide that just kind of gutted me. But yeah.
So you had these personal tragedies to contend with, and, you know, dear friends of yours who were finding living intolerable, and you know, grieving their loss. And, you know, what was it that you obviously you obviously read Crisis of Conscience when you were newly married. Talk us through how you actually managed to extricate yourself from the Jehovah's Witness religion.
It took a while because I was still married to a Jehovah's Witness. So 4 years into our marriage, that's when I hadn't read Crisis of Conscience or anything. I read Che Guevara's biography, and that was the light where I was just like, oh my God, I can't let the speakers from the platform talk bad to single moms and stuff, where it's just like, just get out in service and everything will be fine. It's just like, dude, you don't have kids. Don't treat these people like this. So I couldn't listen to it anymore. I couldn't listen to this inane things from the platform. So that's when I just told her I got to go. And that was in 1999. But I thought it was the truth, and there was something wrong. And I was kind of just not going and trying to discover things on my own. I started writing very seriously then, and I started doing film stuff a lot more serious then. So I stopped going to meetings, but I wasn't doing anything crazy. So I was the big confuser. It's like, wait a second, where's Tony? Is he out, you know, having sex and drugging? No, he's just creative. We don't know what to do with that. And then, so fast forward, 9 years after that, I was still married, and I finished the book. I'd been on Jesus Jerk for about 3 years, and I felt like I had a final draft of the book. And then I found out about 3 weeks later that my ex-wife was cheating on me for a while through all of this, and she was the Jehovah's Witness, which is the irony of it. It wasn't a great marriage, so that's fine. The cheating part doesn't bug me as much as the insane seething hatred from the Jehovah's Witnesses coming after me because she told them, he wrote an apostate book. I've been sucking dick, but he wrote an apostate book. And they're just like, apostate what?
Yeah, apostasy, you know, kind of trumps everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So in a way, that's kind of, I can't help but listen to your story and have in mind, you know, this film that I've watched recently. So in a way, this very kind of, what happens in the film is it's a quick transition, but this transition from Gabe being this kind of suited and booted devout Jehovah's Witness to being kind of a peripheral Jehovah's Witness who is, you know, embracing a quote unquote worldly lifestyle. That seems to be modeled a bit on your experience, because you're describing someone who, you know, basically was living a double life, but who, because he was quote unquote creative, the elders didn't really know what to do and didn't have much control over you. Is that fair?
They had a vice grip on me for everything for a while, and then I was a pioneer and ministerial servant when I was 19. But I had this love for seeing live music, and they couldn't understand. They were just like, I was seeing bands they never heard of before. So they were just like, you know, they're like, what's a Nirvana? You know, because the Nirvana hadn't hit yet, and all their kids are going to go run and see them in 5 years from now. But I'd go to see bands all the time, but I was still like a pioneer and still doing all this stuff. And they knew that I had this insatiable thing for live music. And I would even bring up scripture to them. I can't even remember the scriptures now. I'll be like, no, King David, he did this. And so what, you know, Ed, we're supposed to go out and dance because this is part of it. And they were just like, we don't know what to say to that. Okay, go see Fishbone, whatever a Fishbone is. So
your elders were a pushover, weren't they? By the sound.
No, not only on that part I lucked out. And, but everything else, it was I had one 8-hour judicial committee meeting about a girl just staying at my house, at my apartment one night. And she slept on the couch. That part of the film was like totally
that scene
true.
In the film. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The elders meeting in the film is not 8 hours. I had 2 4-hour meetings where I'm going, we didn't even drink. She just crashed out on my couch. And it was like, I should have just butt fucked her like all night. It would have been easier.
It would have been the same amount of scrutiny from the elders. And if you'd have just said, yes, we had sex, but I'm repentant, it probably would have been over quicker.
But they would have asked how many times it went inside and out. They would have gotten all their juicy masturbatory stories. So,
those invasive questions, were they based on personal experience?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Like I was after thanks for reminding me of this. After my uncle killed himself, my dad had a nervous breakdown, my sister attempted suicide. I know this. I'm the feel good movie of the year here. This was when I was 19 and I was a ministerial servant, and the elders were like, "We need to talk to you." I'm like, "All right." So I had to confess about touching boobies, right? So I went in there, and I was just like, I think God's going to kill me in Armageddon because I touched. I'll say her name because we're friends now. I'll tell you, I touched Rachel's boobies, and I felt her vagina, and they were just, and right away they went, "That's why Jehovah's Holy Spirit is off of your family." They blamed my uncle's suicide, my dad's nervous breakdown, everything on me touching a boobies and a vagina. And it gutted me to beyond belief. And I didn't know what to do with that. And it was a 5 elder meeting, and they're just all kind of nodding their head going, we found the answer to our question. But during that meeting, they said, "Did you penetrate her?" And I was like, "I don't know." And they're like, "Well, you do know, did you?" And I'm like, I don't know. And then later, when I got married and I did get my finger in a vagina, I was like, "Oh, I didn't. It's really warm in there." It's just like, I didn't know because I didn't have the experience. And these guys are assuming that, the shame they press down on you. Of course, it's just like, no, I don't. Because I've never, why would I know?
Yeah, they're expecting you to know as much as they do about sex, even though they're allowed to have sex because they're married, and you're not because you're not married and you're a teenager or whatever.
Yeah. So I didn't know what it felt like to be inside until later. And then I was like, oh, I didn't penetrate. I wanted to go back, go, hey, could we do this meeting over again?
Can we reconvene this meeting from however many years ago?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I got the answer. I got it.
I'll even draw you a diagram.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, again, the sexual repression element, I talk about it in my book. I think that it really does a number on you. I think that when you mess around with people's, desires, and, you tamper with people's sexuality, I think it has, long-standing effects on people. And, it ultimately can ruin relationships. And, I'm wondering whether, you felt the fallout from the sexual repression in later years, or do you feel it was more or less confined to when you were younger, these restrictions?
Still feel it from those years. I mean, the problem is with the Jehovah's Witnesses is they're like, hey, kids shouldn't be fucking each other. And you're like 6 years old going, what does that mean? They say it differently.
Yeah,
I'm a little more crass. I was like,
yeah.
But they're just like, you can't even look at a woman, or it's adultery. You can't this, or it's God's going to kill you. And then all of a sudden, I'm like at 10 years old going, I like women with nylons on. Those sisters are nice. And I'm thinking I'm going to die at Armageddon because I'm looking at a woman. I don't even know what a woman is yet. So they're telling you constantly, don't. And you're like, don't what? Oh, wait. Here's some normal desires, and now I feel tremendous guilt because I've had 10 years of don't, but actually they're kind of pointing, they're just saying, don't look at the white elephant in the room. Stop looking at the white elephant in the room. And you're just like, how can I not look at it? So it's almost they're hypersexual. It drives me crazy to look back and go, kids aren't sexualized like they are in the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's they're like, don't go to rated R movies, but they're rated R every day, every time at the Kingdom Hall because of the themes they keep bringing up. And you're just going, what does that mean? What does that mean? oh wait, I got a boner, I'm gonna die. It's just like boom. So yeah, and like even it was funny because like after I found out I was getting divorced, I never had sex with anyone other than my wife at the time. So I was like, I was gutted. I like for 3 months, and then I lived in San Francisco, and I just met this girl at a bar down the street, and we went and we ended up back at her place, and then I ended up having sex with her, and then she and I had to tell her, I'm like, I got to tell you, you're the second person I've ever had sex with in my life. I'm not expecting anything, but I just want to let you know this is really important to me. And she was like, oh my God, she was so excited by that, but. It was hilarious that in my 30s I had, I'm like, oh, sex is different than the Jehovah's Witnesses. Huh. Anyway,
and that's
I veered there, I think.
And that's an odd conversation to be having in your 30s, isn't it? With a sexual partner, you're the second person I've ever had sex with. And you can imagine, clearly the conversation didn't go that badly on this occasion, but you can imagine it freaking some people out. Because sexuality and relationships can be very complicated, and you can just imagine some people thinking, "Whoa, this is a bit too heavy for me." So yeah, I do definitely relate to that, and I'm grateful to Confessions for bringing those issues to the fore. Is there anything else about the film that you're glad that it shines a light on? Were there any kind of elements of Jehovah's Witness culture that you were keen to introduce to the story?
The book started as a short story about getting excited about going out in service, so I could sit next to the sisters that I had a huge crush on, and our legs can touch in the backseat of the car. So the beginning of Jesus Jerk was about preaching and how like utterly amazing it was, because that was the only time I could sit with the girl I loved. And actually, I found out years later the girl that I was pining for loved me back. I was just really? What? We could have. What are you talking about? Would have never worked. But in the 14, 15-year-old kid's mind, where you're just like you're able to sit right next to and angle yourself to sit next to the girl, makes preaching all worth it, makes all the humiliation worth it, just to smell some hair. It was so that I think it's weird because we had joy in there too, weird joy. It's like really repressed, but I got to sit next to her. And then the dance parties we had for some odd reason our congregation sucked. And they would be like, no dance parties. But we found out if you go to the Spanish congregations or the Black congregations, they had dance parties. So we just made friends with all the other congregations as much as possible, so we can go to these dance parties and just dance. And, it was like chaperoned and whatever, but we didn't care. We just wanted to dance for 5 hours and sweat and take off. So there was there was a lot of and this is more in the book, and actually we filmed more dance parties, but they didn't make the final cut of the film, and it's good they didn't. The tone would have been screwed up.
They would have thought that it's just a dance party religion.
Yeah. And it was. I mean, I'm sure I stayed in longer because we had, we would drive to dance parties every weekend and meet new brothers and sisters, and we'd have new friends. And that's the weird thing. It's the friend smash cut. You just get people in your life and you're like, oh my God, we're friends because we're both Jehovah's Witnesses. And that still boggles my mind. I feel like I've had problems with that for the last few years, realizing that not everyone you meet is your friend immediately. And I think there's just kind of
apart from me.
Yeah. It's weird. Oh, apart from you?
Yeah, apart from me. I'm your friend, surely. We've just met.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. I'm talking about like when you meet someone who's a Jehovah's Witness, you're both in a suit and tie, and you say hi.
Yeah,
and then you're like,
it's agape, isn't it? It's agape love. You have to have agape love for each other.
Yeah, it's weird because that part's kind of cool, but it's so rooted in awfulness. It's like the Nazis. They dressed well. I mean, those guys had fashion, but they're terrible. They're at the lowest. They're the bottom scum of the earth. But look at the sleekness of the suits that make them look skinnier. That's a bad
Yes.
joke.
I think I know what you're saying. There's, any group can have kind of elements to it that are kind of almost like a saving grace when you're in. And when you're in the organization, the compulsory friendship, which is in a way quite creepy and not the way healthy relationships are developed, but the compulsory friendship is something that you can rely on. And that, for example, you could jump on a plane and land in a completely different country and you've got instant friends, just add water. You speak the same language, you study the exact same magazine and indeed the exact same article when you go to their Sunday meeting as you would be back home. And that kind of universality is kind of a crutch, isn't it? It's something that is always there for you,
The first time I went to Paris, I slept in the corner of a room of two pioneer guys who I knew through a friend of a friend. And I went to the English speaking congregation in Paris on Sundays with the same watchtower. And you think your whole world is that small and expansive at the same time. And then you lose that social aspect of it. That really messes with your mind too. That's part of, I had agoraphobia for many years, really bad. And it wasn't until I read, Combating the Cult Mind, where I was just like, oh, this is normal. And it's just because that belief system, I can't jump into Paris now and go crash at someone's floor. But in order to do that, I'd have to go to the meetings every week and go back into that awful belief system. So it's
you take it for granted when it's there. When it's not there, you realize how complicated it would be you couldn't just reconstruct it.
Right.
Relationships require energy and time and lots of work. And the healthy relationships, that is normal relationships.
Yeah, that's the fun part of it is learning. And, even the relationships with women I've had since I was divorced, I realized how it's not uncommon to talk to people who haven't slept with a lot of people who are worldly, so-called worldly, we'll use the terms that the JWs shoved down our throat. But there were some women that I slept with, that I'd slept with more people than they had by the time we got together, because it's okay not to sleep with a lot of people. People have,
some people are asexual. Some people just aren't into that,
Well, there's that too. But I didn't turn any asexual people onto sex. So
no.
I'm like, hey, come on. You're asexual around me? What?
It's interesting that you mention about the parties, because I don't know whether you've seen the film Apostasy, but that also includes, parties where they're kind of letting their hair down a little bit. And I've heard people react to that and say, well, that's inaccurate. That's just not what the Jehovah's Witness religion is like. And I can imagine there being congregations where there are no parties and where everything is done completely by the book, and everyone leads this kind of puritanical lifestyle. But my experience of being a Jehovah's Witness, incidentally, in the part of the world that Apostasy is based in, is that there were these congregations where dance parties were acceptable. And I even was in like a band where we would play the music at some of these parties and get people on the dance floor. So it's strange how such a strict, controlling, micromanaging religion leaves just enough room for people to interpret it in such a way that you can go to these sorts of gatherings and let your hair down and it sort of be okay with the local elders,
I left the Jehovah's Witnesses for a year after I got the judgment of, oh, that's why your uncle killed himself. You should not touch a vagina. And I was just like, what? And so I went and took radio classes, and I just stopped going to the meetings. But I was scared to death that Armageddon was going to come while I was there. So I always had my toe back in. But well, when I came back, and they loved studying me back in, they're like, well, welcome back into the flock. Are you sure you didn't have sex? I'm like, no, I didn't have sex. I was scared of God, when I was doing college radio. And they wouldn't believe I never had sex with it. And I'm just like, no, I still believed. I was just doing radio shows. But when I came back, the dance parties were strong. And so I'd been going to clubs a lot when I was, out, and just dancing. So when I came back in, it was oh my God, I could just still dance on weekends. This is great. Let's love study. Let's get me back in. Let's go. I believe I'm going to die at Armageddon if I don't do this. And there's dance parties. Where's the punch bowl?
When did you stop believing that you were going to die at Armageddon? Or do you still believe that?
That's a good question.
You hinted at that at the beginning.
Yeah, no, what I've come away from is I'm glad I just don't know anymore, because it's shoved down our throat. We're preaching at the door from 4 or 5 years old. We know the truth and you don't. We know how you're going to die and you don't. And so now I don't believe in Armageddon, and I don't believe in anything coming down from God, but I don't know what the afterlife is. And I'm just staying, I don't want to die, because I kind of like, I like living for all its struggle and whatever it is, but there's a kind of a beauty in not knowing. And then I'm sorry, I lost your question. Were you asking me
when did you stop believing in Armageddon? If you stopped believing, you've just answered,
okay. Yeah. So probably about 20 years ago, when I was just like, something's wrong. I think I still believed in Armageddon, but I didn't think Jehovah was going to kill everybody. I thought he's going to let everyone through. The Jehovah's Witnesses got it wrong. Jehovah's going to let everyone through because he's not that much of a dick, and then later on, I was like, oh no, he's a dick. but it's just, and then I think it was gradual. I just started to realize, oh wait, the Bible's not literal. The Bible's a, compiled mess of, some good philosophy in there. There's another book that's got some good stuff where you're like, oh yeah, treat your neighbor like you treat yourself, and go kill your son because God tells you to, because you're schizophrenic. And it's like, well, okay, well, we can take the good nuggets and the bad nuggets, and it's, and I don't believe in it like that anymore. So, man, I think I screwed up answering your question. I'm doing it wrong. Am I doing it wrong?
No, well, sort of. I'm anxious to find out what the epiphany was, or I realize it's a gradual process, and it's sometimes difficult to track down when we stopped believing a particular thing. But I'm just wondering if there was like a eureka moment where you thought, you know what, I'm not going to die at Armageddon. I'm actually okay.
Probably reading Crisis of Conscience. That shattered everything for me. And that was just like, oh my God, all this is wrong. I think everything's wrong. And that's probably when I really kind of just was open. I felt like I was a blossoming weed / flower. I'm just like, what do we do with that information when we have it from someone like Ray Franz, And I felt so grateful and so shattered all at once. And that's when my agoraphobia symptoms really started to kick in. And I didn't realize that was parallel to what happens when your belief system is shattered, when you grow up in a cult that tells you, put blinders on, and then you get a little glimpse, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, it's not Sodom and Gomorrah over there. And then you're like, oh wait, that is Sodom and Gomorrah. I want to go hang in Sodom for a little while, and I'll come back to you guys.
It's overrated, trust me. But so you were in the process of writing Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk when you stopped believing that you would be destroyed imminently at Armageddon.
I didn't believe I would be destroyed. So before then,
you thought you were going to survive.
I thought everyone was going to survive. So I had this rationality for years where I was just like, Armageddon's coming, but Jehovah's not that much of an asshole to only take the Jehovah's Witnesses. And there
are more tickets available than the Jehovah's Witnesses would have you believe. Okay.
Yeah, the Jehovah's Witnesses had the red velvet rope, but actually there was another rope too that you could go.
Fantastic. So I'm getting to the end now. I guess I'm interested to ask you, because as a fellow writer, I'm fortunately in a position now with my book where, I think when you're writing about Jehovah's Witnesses, you're writing about a moving target, especially in the detail that I write about them, where I'm trying to catalog everything and explain everything and document the history and the teachings and what have you. So I'm close to writing my second edition to The Reluctant Apostate. I'm guessing there won't be multiple editions of Confessions, but if you could write an updated version, is there anything that you would want to include maybe in the postscript or something as like an addendum to your story? Is there any kind of message that you wish, could be kind of smuggled in there in retrospect.
I have written the sequel.
Oh, you have written a sequel. Oh, okay.
But it's as a TV series pitch, and but that one is Gabe stays in the Jehovah's Witnesses because in order to get the story continuing to go, he has to stay in.
Oh,
if that makes
okay.
sense. So yeah, to be in the world of. But what is that my sequel I see in my head? No, my sequel's a lot different. What other things that I would like to get in there? You know, the biggest hits for me were my friend's suicides, the suicide narrative, the sexual repression. It's I guess the multiple tragedies that can happen. I don't know. I really feel like, you know what I wanted with Confessions of a Teenage Jesus Jerk? I wanted it to be the end of my ex-Jehovah's Witness identity. I wanted to walk away from it after I read the novel and go, great, that was done. Next chapter of my life has nothing to do with Jehovah's Witnesses. And then all of a sudden I was working on a TV adaptation of it. I'm like, oh, great, I got to read this book again and start working on these characters again. And then that fizzled out. And I'm like, okay, cool, don't got to do that. And then it came along where it's like, now Eric Stoltz is interested and he wants a script. And I'm like, so then I had to dive into these characters again. And I thought the movie was going to be the end of it. I was like, I don't have to be the ex-Jehovah's Witness guy anymore. What I'm learning is I'm the ex-Jehovah's Witness guy, and it's okay. It's not, I can't shake that identity. I think now, I don't know if it's, I think now I find it in my heart, like I have a burning desire to talk to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses now that I didn't have before. And I want to be more in a community with them and be like, hey, this is hard. And this, but it's okay because life is hard and the human condition is hard, but it's worth it. It's really cool. But we have a weird angle on it. And I think Confessions was written for the novel and to get made into a film. There was a very specific audience for that. Now I feel like I want to talk more to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses on that subject than talk to the whole world on the subject. I want to kind of have ex-Jehovah's Witnesses congregate a little more so we can all give our experiences and be like, hey, we're all nuts, but we're all okay. Can we here's how I did it. How did you do it? So I don't know if I would really care about messages. If the sequel, the TV series does go through, that's just going to be about how do you keep a TV show on Netflix, with that theme. So there's not going to be too much of an agenda. That's going to be more, hey, I have this experience. Here's drama. What'll bring the viewers? It'll be complete. I'll be a whore. I'll just be a TV whore. But when it comes to just having relationships with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and I've been more at the ex-Jehovah's Witness meetups and finding that it's really like important for me to be there and see other people's experiences, and I don't feel as weird, and then we can all just kind of have a gathering of information. So
that's really interesting. So you wrote the book and wrote the screenplay with a view to gaining closure from your Jehovah's Witness experience. And what you found is that there is a vehicle for doing that, but it's not necessarily writing a book and writing a screenplay. It's through being able to relate to other people and gain catharsis through, shared experience and people sharing each other's stories. And I totally relate to that.
Just being open about it with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. I was trying to just avoid it. And I'm like, no, I was avoiding this isn't an ex-Jehovah's Witness film. This is a film about the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then it's just like, I would see people online going, this guy's mentally in still. What's his and I'm like, I was trying to tell the story, man. I wouldn't reply, but I'm just like, you Google at 2:30 in the morning and you're like, I feel lonely. What are they saying about me? And then you're like, oh, crap, I shouldn't have done that.
I think that there were parts of the film where maybe a little bit too much creative license was taken in how the witnesses are portrayed. But, as long as you tell an entertaining story, which I think you did, and Eric Stoltz did, what that does is it starts a conversation and people wanting to find out more. So even if you quote unquote whore yourself with the series, again, you're still pointing at, this huge bounty of batshit craziness that people can, if they want to, just check out on Google and get the full story. But there's no harm in, for artistic, creative purposes, using it to just entertain people. And you know, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with just uplifting people with fiction? So I totally understand that. Yeah. What I'm saying is, you're not a whore.
Can I use that as a blurb on my next book?
You're
not a whore. Tony DuShane's not a whore. Lloyd Evans.
Lloyd Evans, reluctant apostate. Yes, definitely. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this, Tony, and I guess it would be fitting to bring things to a close by asking if you have any advice for any teenage Jesus jerks who might be watching this interview.
It's hard being in the Jehovah's Witnesses when you're a teenager. And I think just let yourself off the hook. If you believe, that's cool, you know, just believe, but kind of give yourself room. It's not all, everything's kind of gray. It's not all black and white. That's kind of the best I can do. I know some people probably aren't ready to read Reluctant Apostate or Jesus Jerk, and that's fine. We all have our own journeys. I think for the most part, teenagers we need to just let them off the hook for everything and go, oh, okay, just do your thing. You know, teenagers, Jehovah's Witness teenagers, just do your thing and relax, and it'll work out in the end. You might be in the wrong religion when you're 20s, but it'll work out in the end.
Yeah, I think especially, you know, with the tragedies in terms of suicides, you know, that's the best advice is to not hate yourself for being young and for, you know, exploring what life has to offer. And I think that, you know, if that wasn't such a huge issue, there wouldn't be so much self-loathing and so many mental health issues. And it's really, really sad that sort of thing and sexual repression and shunning has taken lives. So be alive and enjoy living. You can do it without getting addicted to, you know, harmful substances. You can do it without, you know, leading a destructive life. You can lead a happy, meaningful life and just enjoy living. And there's nothing wrong with doing that.
And I hate myself now, and I'm old. You'll never stop hating yourself. When we realize that, we're fine.
Indeed. I don't hate you, Tony.
I love you, Lloyd.
I certainly feel fonder now that I've got to know you a bit better in this interview. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Lloyd. I appreciate it.
So viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I have enjoyed it immensely. Don't forget that you can enjoy more videos like this by subscribing to the Lloyd Evans channel. But that's all I have time for. Thank you so much for watching.